Good afternoon. That was a wonderful introduction, by the way. Thank you very much. And yeah, Chairman, something tells me that a year ago that you didn't kick off with a letter from the White House. I don't know. Maybe even 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I know I certainly haven't gotten any invites in the White House in the past 4 years. The last 10 days I've gotten a few more, which is very nice. But good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here today with leading off the New York Conservative Party Convention to discuss the remarkable accomplishments already of my former boss, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Already in just the first 2 weeks of his second term, it's tough to believe it's only 2 weeks, just the pace that he's going at. We're not even at 2 weeks yet, but it's unreal to see all of the accomplishments already. He is on a torrid pace with strategic and ambitious plans laid out for the rest of the first 100 days and, frankly, for the next 4 years. Let's dive in to how President Trump has already begun to shape this nation's future with decisive action and foresight. In the whirlwind of the first 2 weeks, President Trump has demonstrated a commitment to the promises he made on the campaign trail. Promises made, promises kept. Let's think about, let's see, what could we start with? What's one that maybe is going to get the national attention? How about border security? How about we start there? Border crossings have plummeted as a result of stringent new policies. President Trump has declared a national emergency at the border, deploying additional forces to secure our sovereignty and ensure safety. Actions against illegal immigration have led to the arrest of individuals with criminal backgrounds, underscoring a commitment to law and order, unlike the last administration. I always say that politicians have narratives. It's the data that proves whether those narratives are true or fictional. So let's dive a little bit into the data. In December of 2023, under Alejandro Mayorkas, Joe Biden, and of course the border czar, Kamala Harris, right? I know she campaigned saying she wasn't the border czar, but just because she didn't go down to the border doesn't mean that she wasn't the border czar. A sad new record of over 302,000 illegal border crossers happened at the U.S. southern border. In just the first week of President Trump, get this, there were less than 600. That's an over 99% decrease. Think about that, 99% decrease. And as for the U.S. northern border, hello to my friends in Clinton and Jefferson County and all the other counties that border Canada, in 2023, there were over 190,000 illegal crossings at the northern border, spiking to over 18,600 in May of 2023. In the first week of President Trump, that number was under 500. That's a nearly 90% reduction from the record high of just 20 months ago. And if anyone wants to talk about the weather in May being a factor versus in what's been a very cold month of January, I'd be very glad to make a large wager that these numbers are going to continue under Tom Homan and President Trump. Actually, just yesterday, in fact, and by the way, if I've missed something that the Trump administration has done this morning as I was driving up, it's very possible that there have been 5 new executive orders announced. It's very possible that I've missed a few different things, even on a Sunday morning, because that's how fast he's moving. But just yesterday, in fact, President Trump signed the Imposing Duties to Address the Flow of Illicit Drugs Across Our Northern Border Act. In it, President Trump says, the challenges at our southern border are foremost in the public's consciousness, but our northern border is not exempt from these issues. Criminal networks are implicated in human trafficking and smuggling operations, enabling unvetted illegal migration across our northern border. There is also a growing presence of Mexican cartels operating fentanyl synthesis labs in Canada. The flow of illicit drugs like fentanyl to the United States through both illicit distribution networks and international mail, and by the way, that absolutely is the case. When I worked in the White House, one of the issue sets that I worked on was with the Drug Task Force, and I remember this fentanyl really starting to pour in more and more in 2017 as we were still getting a grip on what the issues actually were. And they were absolutely using the mail and different ways of actually hiding it. I remember, frankly, actually, even the dogs that would generally be used to sniff for all kinds of illegal drugs, a few of them immediately overdosed because the fentanyl is so small that even them making contact with it, think of like 2 grains of salt, them making contact with that amount of fentanyl, they would overdose and die immediately. So this is a real issue. Back to the executive order. Due in the case of the latter to the existing administrative exemption from duty and taxes, also known as de minimis, under Section 1321 of Title 19 United States Code, has created a public health crisis in the United States as outlined in the presidential memorandum of January 20th, 2025. An executive order 14157 of January 20th, 2025, designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations and specifically designated global terrorists. The reason why I'm reading through part of this is I actually just had a conversation with President Trump last week about this and his team specifically, and he had brought up tariffs and the northern border, and it was a bit of a conversation about New York as well, because the conversation was about the southern border, and he talked about making sure that we didn't forget about the issues with our northern border as well. With respect to smuggling of illicit drugs across our northern border, Canada's Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center recently published a study on the laundering of proceeds of illicit synthetic opioids, which recognize Canada's heightened domestic production of fentanyl, largely from British Columbia, and its growing footprint within international narcotics distribution. Despite a North American dialogue on the public health impacts of illicit drugs since 2016, Canadian officials have acknowledged that the problem has only grown. And while U.S. Customs and Border Protection within the Department of Homeland Security seized comparatively much less fentanyl from Canada than from Mexico last year, fentanyl is so potent that even a very small parcel of the drug can cause many deaths and destruction to American families. In fact, the amount of fentanyl that crossed the northern border last year could kill 9.5 million Americans. And obviously, New York is one of the places where we're getting the brunt of that. Immediate action is required to finally end this public health crisis and national emergency, which will not happen unless the compliance and cooperation of Canada is assured. So what other actions are we seeing? Other executive orders. The administration, the Trump administration, has taken over 300 executive actions within less than the first 2 weeks, setting a record pace for policy implementation. These actions have ranged from immigration enforcement, as we just talked about, to deregulation, aiming to swiftly address critical issues affecting American workers and national security. Speaking of deregulation, by the way, President Trump has made the commitment to the American people that for every regulation he signs into law, he will cut 10, which is absolutely in line with what he did the first term. The first term, he walked out of office. I remember he made that promise actually on the campaign trail in 2016. He said, for every regulation I sign into law, I'll cut 2. And I remember a conversation with the head of Office of Management and Budget at the time. It was Mick Mulvaney at the end of 2017, and we had asked for a status update. We'd seen that they had done a whole lot of work in deregulating and in cutting the red tape. And we said, what is that actual number? How many regulations did he sign into law? How many did he actually cut? And at the end of the first year, it was actually over 20 regulations that he cut to the one that he would sign. Amazing. That number, by the time he walked out of the White House, was still 8 to 1. For every new regulation he'd sign into law, he would cut 8, which, by the way, it's appropriate talking about this here in Albany as the regulations that the state government just continues to throw on you, one after another after another. Washington is setting the tone here from a national standpoint, and unfortunately, Albany should be following. From an economic perspective, with over $1.1 trillion invested back into the United States already, and that's a lot of that private, as we've seen the president continues to be the businessman that he has been known to be for the last, I don't want to say how old he is, we all know how old he is, but for his entire life. And he is finding ways for private investment to come back here to the United States. I think that's so key. But over $1.1 trillion invested back in the United States already. President Trump has prioritized economic growth. Investments in infrastructure, manufacturing, and small businesses have been fast-tracked, leveraging the power of executive orders to cut through bureaucratic red tape. Another issue, drill, baby, drill. Energy independence, which, by the way, we could use some of that here in New York as well. The Trump administration has moved to reignite energy production by revoking the Biden-Obama-era restrictions that saw gas prices skyrocket and inflation go through the roof. This move towards energy dominance not only strengthens our national security, but also promises economic benefits through job creation and reduced reliance on foreign energy sources. By the way, I want to congratulate Administrator Zeldin on his Senate confirmation. A few years ago, we may have ran a tough primary against each other, but we've long been friends, and I know he'll do a great job at the EPA. And we also actually happen to share the same birthday, believe it or not. He's older, but I won't talk about who's wiser. So, making America safe again, right? Yesterday morning, President Trump ordered precision military airstrikes on the senior ISIS attack planner and others this terrorist recruited and led in Somalia. To quote President Trump directly, and I love the way that he finishes this off, so I wanted to quote him because I couldn't put this any better than he did. These killers who we found hiding in caves threatened the United States and our allies. The strikes destroyed the caves they lived in and killed many terrorists without in any way harming civilians. Our military has targeted this ISIS attack planner for years, but Biden and his cronies wouldn't act quickly enough to get the job done. I did. This message to ISIS and all others who would attack Americans is that we will find you and we will kill you. Changing the subject here. By the way, Chairman, I did not see any pronouns in the program for myself or any of us. I was just wondering why that was. Well, I think we all see eye to eye with President Trump on this one, as in his first days in office, the president has taken several steps to protect women and girls. Here are the key actions. President Trump signed the Defending Women from Gender Ideology, Extremism, and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government Act to dismantle the previous administration's policy on gender, particularly those that allow biological men to compete in women's sports. This order will define sex as strictly male or female based on reproductive biology, think about that, science, oh my goodness, and genetics at birth, effectively banning men from competing in women's sports. This also has an effect on Title IX. The Department of Education under President Trump has issued guidance to schools reinforcing the original intent of Title IX, which is to ensure that women's scholarships, sports, and spaces like locker rooms are reserved for biological females. Schools that are not compliant are at risk of losing federal funding. I remember talking last year on my radio show with Riley Gaines, who many of you know. She's been all over Fox, and she's been a real advocate for this. She was one of the podium members when Leah Thomas, the boy who transitioned to be a girl, actually competed and won the swimming championship against Riley back in 2022 or 2023. And obviously she gained the national spotlight doing this. But I asked her, I said, when did you find out that you were going to be competing against a biological male? She said she found out in the locker room. And if you can imagine, a swimming locker room is a place where, you know, you probably bear all. And that's where she found out that she was going to be competing against a biological male. It's disgusting what they've done to our women and to our girls. And as the father of a daughter, I am thankful that we're standing up for just common sense again, just real common sense. And just 2 days ago, the Office of Personnel Management issued guidance to federal agencies, and I guess to the Conservative Party of New York for the no pronouns as well, although something tells me we didn't need those guidelines here, thankfully, directing them to turn off email systems features prompting for pronouns and to remove pronouns from employee email signatures effective 5 p.m. January 31st, just 2 days ago. I jokingly texted a few of my friends that are working back in the administration who I worked with and said that they better make adjustments. They weren't going to have to make adjustments. They were probably the ones that were helping to write this executive order, frankly. Multiple federal agencies, including the CDC, Department of Transportation, and others like the Department of Energy and the State Department, sent out internal memos to their staff to comply with these orders. These actions reflect President Trump's policy to recognize only two biological sexes and to eliminate the practice that promotes gender ideology within government communications and operations. It starts at the top. These initial steps reflect President Trump's promise to put America first. And yes, put America first, and to execute policies with efficiency and directness, which resonates with the American public's desire for government that acts rather than just discusses, or frankly, that just lies to us. In the first 2 weeks, President Trump has been relentless and accomplished what takes most administrations 100 days. Heck, it's more than the Biden administration accomplished in his whole term. But what are the plans for the rest of his first 100 days? We will continue to see aggressive action on illegal immigration and border enforcement. And I think once President Trump's cabinet is confirmed by the Senate, that will take up much of the oxygen from the media. Accountable government will continue to be a theme. President Trump has an employee, actually a volunteer, who happens to be the richest man in the world. You might have heard of him, Elon Musk. Mr. Musk is heading up the Department of Government Accountability, better known as DOGE. Together, they have outlined plans to deliver a government that's truly accountable to its citizens, which involves reducing the size of the bureaucracy, cutting wasteful spending, and increasing transparency in government operations. Initiatives are also in place to protect whistleblowers and to ensure that government serves the interest of the people, not special interests. Global stability. Promoting global stability involves renegotiating international agreements that are unfavorable to the United States, strengthening alliances where they benefit the United States and our citizens, and taking firm stances against nations that challenge our security or economic interests. This, as we've already seen, includes revisiting trade deals and ensuring that America's military might is respected worldwide. For all the media's bluster about President Trump starting World War III, President Trump made the world safer in his first term and more peaceful. 2 wars were started under Joe Biden's watch that President Trump has to clean up. But President Trump will end those wars and bring peace to the Western world, not by putting our head in the sand, but by competing to make sure America leads in technology, monetary policy, and military strength. President Trump knows that everyone in the world doesn't have to like us, but they damn sure better respect the United States of America. Education, and I only had a few minutes to browse through the platforms of the Conservative Party as I got here. I have a pretty good idea for what they are, but if you turn to the book there and see what it says about education, I think this is going to align very, very closely with what it says in there. And I love the very, very first line that it says in the program specifically about it. In education, President Trump aims to empower states with more control over their educational systems. Actually, maybe in a place like New York, that's not a good idea. But federally, for the most part, more local say is a good idea on this. And that's actually how I think Maude and I first met, was talking about a lot of this, who's going to be up in a few speakers running for district attorney against a guy named Alvin Bragg, who you may have heard of. Yeah. I sat through that criminal trial in the spring of last year, was in the courthouse almost every day with President Trump. And I really, really hope that Manhattanites, that the people of New York County actually really vote for somebody that is not going to put politics first and is not going to be a political actor the way that Alvin Bragg has, and I know that would be Maude Marin. But in education, President Trump aims to empower states with more control over their educational systems. That will include a strong push for expanded school choice. Reduced federal involvement and increased local will lead to better educational outcomes because parents' voices are most effective and echo the loudest at the local level. Disempowering the powerful teachers' unions is essential. We have to let those mama bears roar, right? That's what we have to do to promote greater choice in education. Judicial appointments, the swift nomination and confirmation of judges, and by the way, the swift confirmation as well. I know we're talking about judicial appointments, but let's get through the Senate confirmation process already. There are a lot of great people out there, Kash Patel, that really, really deserve to be nominated. And you look at even some of the Republicans that may be dragging their feet on this. Some of these Republicans that are dragging their feet voted for every single one of President Biden's nominees. Time to actually understand that and realize that President Trump has a mandate. Time to confirm his cabinet so that way they can get to work. If you confirm his cabinet, then we're also now starting to look at what we can do from a legislative perspective. You start getting the team in there, and instead of just the executive action, you now have a fuller team that can work on more permanent legislation that turns into laws, on top of all the other regulatory issues that all of these agencies are going to have to unwind from a Biden administration that was just choking off so much of American ingenuity because and through regulation. But judicial appointments, the swift nomination and confirmation of judges who interpret the Constitution as written, will continue under a second term of President Trump. It took a 4-year hiatus, but will continue under President Trump, aiming to ensure that the judiciary reflects the nation's foundational legal principles. While the last administration focused on lawfare, going after President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, January 6ers, parents that spoke up at school board meetings, people praying in front of Planned Parenthood clinics, President Trump will focus on straightening out the corruption in our Justice Department, FBI, and activist judges. So, in conclusion, and I know we'll probably do a few questions over here. I probably have some good personal stories to share about President Trump. I was with him, I guess, a few weeks ago or so now, and had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with he and J.D. Vance and I know the chairman wanted me to share at least a personal story or two. So I had the opportunity to go and play golf with the two of them. And I got there pretty early in the morning, and the now vice president got there a few minutes after me, and he'd played golf one time in the last year or so. So he had asked, and going way, way back, I was a good golfer, played professional golf. That's how I started to spend so much time with President Trump. He asked if I could give him a few tips on the driving range. And I said, yeah, sure, come on out, absolutely, with our president, our vice president-elect. How could I say no? So we got out, he hit a couple of balls, and he said, is there any hope for me? And I told him, I said, well, if there's any hope for America, you won't become a better golfer in the next 12 years. So don't think about your golf for right now. Do this with your grip, and give me a call in 12 years, and we'll start working on your golf game when you have more time. But in conclusion, the first 2 weeks have set a tone of aggressive policy action, and the plans for the first 100 days under President Trump's leadership promise a continuation of this momentum. This administration is not just about setting goals, it's about achieving them with an unwavering commitment to American values, economic prosperity, and national security. So with that, I look forward to a little dialogue, taking some questions. And again, it's an honor to kick off the Conservative Party conference here in Albany. I believe that a lot of the national momentum, and even the momentum that we've seen in New York, I think I saw President Trump got over 300,000 votes on the conservative line that last year. I think this is going to continue into these year's elections, local elections, and into next year's statewide elections, and we'll continue to see this throughout the decade. I think there have just been so many New Yorkers that are fed up with the overregulation from Albany, how that's cut into their lives, and frankly, we can't just continue to see people move out of state to seek their freedoms. We need to create it here in New York. So thank you for the time. Look forward to some questions.